So my guest today is Bibhash Banerjee, who is a dear friend, Inspo colleague, and honestly one of the most versatile and inspired thinkers I know. By trade, he's a brand consultant to some super impressive brands in India like Red Bull, ICICI, and my absolute darling Royal Enfield. He also takes awesome photographs, having amassed millions of views of his images online, and he drinks a lot of coffee. Like, a lot. Bibhash, hey,
Hey man.
I see you are having a coffee and it's like 10 p.m.
Yeah. I'm keeping the coffee industry going. There's only me. If I had to write a book, my title I think would be "Do Stupid Things Faster with More Energy." So I think living up to the brand.
All right, so we're going to skip all small talk because clearly you're ready, you're fired up. Let's dive in. What does inspiration mean to you?
Oh geez. So I ascribe quite a lot to the whole Greek idea of divine intervention, which is where inspiration, the word actually comes from. But while I ascribe to it, I believe inspiration is a lot more tangible. I think it's available everywhere. And for me, if I had to describe inspiration, I think it's a catalyst. It's means to an end. It's not the end. So if you think you're inspired and you think you're done with it, I think you've got it wrong. To me, inspiration is the starting point of something you want to do. It can be anything, right? And it just sparks something for you to go and achieve, build, create, or just live, right? And live in a certain manner, live in a certain way. To me, I think the inspiration is effectively the starting point of whatever else you intend to do after. So yeah, a lot more smaller than divine intervention. But yeah, that's the way I like to look at it.
Yeah, smaller but as equally impactful, right? In terms of what it can achieve and influence in the world.
Absolutely. I think it is the single most important currency for humanity to move forward in any different direction, right? Every invention had an inspiration, every movement had an inspiration. So if you don't have inspiration, I don't think you achieve anything. You can't do anything without inspiration. So
I'm so glad you brought that up. And in fact, that is for right at the end and later. And we're going to talk about people and, inspiration. And of course, this is something that offline we talk about all the time. It's one of those things where inspiration is like one of the world's most emotionally powerful currencies. And yet it's completely untracked, right? It's almost like swept under the rug, invisible so we don't think about it, always sort of raises an eyebrow, and semi awkward conversations, especially with people outside of the creative industry. In fact, even with people in the creative industry, it's one of those concepts where I feel like, how can something so important and fundamental yet be so misunderstood, right? So leads me on nicely to what I wanted to ask you next, actually, because we know how it feels when we are inspired, and more often than not, when not inspired, right? Where we're actually pretty uninspired. So I'm curious, when you're feeling uninspired, what do you do?
uh, the witty answer is I tilt my head. Um,
Let
and I'll explain. Um, to me, actually, inspiration, if I had to find another word for inspiration, is perspective. Um, the more the perspectives you have on anything, the more inspiration you have in general. And if you look at the same thing in a different way, you are bound to be inspired. That's how it is, right? It's hard. Everybody hits a roadblock, a creative block, a thinking block. And you wake up one fine morning and there are issues with, oh my God, this is not an inspiring day and I'm not feeling very inspired to do anything. And it is hard, but it's the small things. Just try and push yourself in a different direction, consume as many different perspectives as you can. If the days that I'm uninspired, I do more things.
Right.
Right. Versus the day that I think I'm going to do great things.
I like that.
And I think those days are far better in terms of my creative thinking abilities. When I'm consuming and just immersing myself in 100 different things. The result at work is far greater as far as I'm concerned. That's what I think. So the days that I'm uninspired, I just look at as many different things as possible. Somewhere something just hits, right? But I think the important thing is to want to find inspiration.
Right.
If you're just looking and hoping that something's going to strike you like a lightning bolt, it most often won't.
Yeah.
But if you're seeking it, the probability is just too high. Like you're always going to find something that inspires you.
That's a super interesting idea because, in a sense, what you're saying is that one man's information is another man's inspiration, right?
Absolutely.
You and I could look at this beautiful Royal Enfield mug. I'm not plugging the brand, I just love them, right? And we could be seeing completely different things. I mean, we of course are seeing completely different things just because we are, different individuals and have very, very different lenses on the world, and that's what makes the world so great and diverse. But if I'm not willing to seek inspiration, then for me it will just be a mug, right? And that will be filled with some liquid. But for you, who knows what it could be?
No, absolutely. I'm gonna self-promote a little bit here, where I'm gonna say that I used to read a lot of theoretical physics for fun. And just last night I saw Tenet, right? The movie. It just reiterates one thing. In theoretical physics, there's a concept which says that we live in a multiverse and
Right.
there's infinite versions of the same thing or the same people. In some universes, you might be a circus clown, and somewhere else a theoretical physicist, right? So if the basic laws of nature is that your reality isn't the only reality, which basically means that you look at the mug and you should be able to find an infinite different realities within that mug. And if I'm exposed to even 5, I have 5 different ways of looking at that mug and coming up with something else. To me, that should spark inspiration. What is mundane to you, which is your reality, will never be inspiring. You need to find those other realities to be inspired all the time. And that, I think, is what looking at the mug differently means. Right? And if it is there in nature as the laws of physics, it should be a reality even for us as we understand and go about finding this divine inspiration that we all keep looking for.
Cool. So to distill and summarize your point, you basically tilt your head and enter the multiverse, right? Great. So, so tell me something. How conscious are you when this inspiration strikes? Because on the one hand, right, you're saying that you need to be consciously seeking it. On the other hand, inspiration seems to arrive at the most unexpected and often inconvenient times in our lives as well, right? So I'm curious to get your thoughts on this.
That's a very smartly worded question, right? So I'm going to break it up. How conscious are you when inspiration strikes you? Not necessarily very conscious all of the time.
Right.
But I think fundamentally, if you're not willing or you're not seeking it, it may hit you like a trailer truck.
Yeah.
And it may still not be inspiration. So, but if you're seeking it and you're willingly looking for it, either actively or passively, inspiration will strike. So either you're actively immersing yourself in content and finding inspiration, taking nature walks and inspiration walks, or going on a ride on a Royal Enfield just to write a novel,
Yep.
whatever it is, right? You're actively going out and finding inspiration, but you might come back home extremely disappointed saying there's no idea, but your mind is still seeking inspiration, in which case you might be bathing, you might be sitting on the pot, or you might have gone to sleep, but your mind is constantly seeking it. So something at that point could become inspiration. Either way, whether it's active or passive, I think at the end of the day, if you're willing and you're seeking, you will find inspiration. So that's why I said it's a smartly worded question. So I'm going to kind of break it up, saying that it can strike you when you're not conscious and about it. But at the end of the day, I think at the very beginning of that exercise, I think you need to be willing and you need to be seeking inspiration and wanting inspiration to come to you, without which I don't think it'll ever happen. Doesn't happen with me.
That is a beautiful answer. I love that. Super resonates. It is definitely you've almost got to give yourself permission, right? To like step away from stress, work, reality, whatever it is that you're going through, whatever rut that you're in, and allow yourself to play. So I love what you said earlier about like just launching yourself into these different contexts and perspectives, like whatever they are, whether it's digitally, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's a conversation or a coffee, or just staring like at a mug, right? And wondering in the nth multiverse, like nth universe, what is this, and what is it filled with, and does it serve another purpose, and just asking those questions. So that's amazing. I love that answer. Cool. So let's move along the creative process a little bit, right? You've tilted your head, you've entered the multiverse, you've got the inspiration, and what's your next move?
The next move is actually quite dependent. So I think the answer is it depends, right? It depends on what? It basically depends on the velocity of the inspiration that struck you. So if it's a really high velocity, singular piece of inspiration that has struck you, and it can lead you straight to an idea.
Yep.
So when the inspiration strikes, you already have an idea in your hand, right? While a lot of the time, and those are very rare occurrences, and it depends on the person, but a lot of the times for me, what happens is I get a lot of mid and low intensity inspirations, like pieces and bits and pieces from all over the place. So for me, then the next step is to obviously go back to those pieces of inspiration, try and synthesize all of it, craft something around it, articulate if there is an articulation required, create, right? Experiment. And I'll talk about it not from a professional point of view, because that's got rigor and there's a certain protocol you follow as a brand consultant, advertising agency, blah, blah, blah. But if inspiration strikes me in the middle of the evening, because I was watching the news or cricket or whatever it is, to go and shoot, like, I don't know exactly what I'm shooting, and I don't really know why I'm shooting it.
Just to be clear, he's talking about photography, not a gun.
Right. Yeah, I'm talking about photography. So
disclaimer, yeah.
Then I just pick up my camera and I go to one part of the house and I set up really random tabletop stuff.
Right.
And then I just play and hope that something comes out at the other end. But all it's wanted, I have a concept, I have a vague idea of what I want to do. And then it's a part of experimentation, crafting, iterations, and playing around with it. So it depends, I guess. What I'm saying is, what's the next step depends on the velocity of the inspiration. Really high will take you straight to the idea, and medium and low will take you to on a path of fun and play and craft and whatever else.
Yeah, that's another just beautiful analogy, actually, because you mentioned earlier you thought of inspiration as a catalyst, right? So it's like the strength of the catalyst, it's almost a function of the velocity, right? Super high velocity, faster catalyst takes you from inspiration to idea to insight just quicker, right? But like you said, most things I find, they almost just form like some kind of lattice or layer of sediment, right? That's just there. It's never wasted time. It's never wasted energy or resource to go and gather these pieces of inspiration. But they may not be actionable in that moment in time, right? And it's almost just like gathers, layer upon layer. I don't think that's the right metaphor, and the right metaphor isn't coming to me right now. But the point is that like sometimes those pieces of inspiration, they will activate later, right? Could be next week, could be in a couple of years. I know that with so many of my projects, it's been a synthesis of, forget about the project itself, it's been a synthesis of like who I am over the last like 4 years, right? A bunch of unsolved problems, questions, insecurities, doubts, fears about an industry or the world, all just like amalgamating, like almost like a potion, just coming together in a moment. But it all comes down to willingness as well, because as you said, if you're not willing, then you're just not creating the conditions for that reaction to even occur, right? So I really like that a lot. So I found that oftentimes we remember the exact moment that inspiration strikes, right? As humans, I feel like we're bad at remembering most things, right? If I asked you, what do you have for breakfast last Tuesday? Maybe you remember, but I imagine that you don't. And it's just a blur, right? Most of your life just feels like a dream that's like passing us by. And yet those inspiration lightning strikes, those are super crystallizing. So I'm curious if you've ever experienced that, and if you have any like memorable incidents to share. I'd love to hear them.
I don't remember what I had for breakfast today. But I can safely say I had coffee.
Right.
Right. But yeah, so I don't remember any of those things, but you're absolutely right. I think when you have that really reference to the previous part of that conversation, right? When you have really high velocity inspiration, you remember what it was, where you were, what you felt at that point, and what you were doing when it hit you. The medium and low velocity inspiration, it simmers, it layers, it adds. So there's no one definitive moment in time that it clicks. So yeah, I do have vivid memories of a couple of these high velocity interactions with inspiration, right? One of them, for example, was I was working on a positioning exercise for an OTT platform, a new brand in Sri Lanka. They were about basically short video content, but OTT level content, right? So production and all of that, not the TikToks of the world, but basically high production, high fidelity OTT content, but really small pieces, like 5-minute episodes kind of series. And we had to position it in a manner that Sri Lanka would be a little blown away.
Right.
We were a little stuck on this. And I remember exactly what happened, and I can even share what the articulation was, which is basically I was sitting staring at competition on my screen for OTT platforms in Sri Lanka, and I was eating a cup of noodles from ramen, right? Because we didn't have time, agency life. So, but while eating that, basically, I looked at the noodles and I said, 2-minute noodles is quick bite. Video is consumed in bite sized. And so the articulation was introducing the new snack in town, right? This was about 2 years ago.
That's brilliant.
So yeah, the inspiration, the source of inspiration was not the computer screen with all the ads and the other competitor scans. It was the 2-minute cup of noodles that was sitting in front of me from ramen, right? So yeah, inspiration can come from a cup of noodles if you're really looking for it. I'll give you another example of the really mundane stuff that we kind of see every day and everywhere. The details of this I can't share, but I was working on another bike launch
Bike.
right? Another bike launch, and we had to do a campaign for a completely new bike, the launch campaign for this bike, and it had to be really hitting home with a lot of the core riders and serious riders of bikes, right? So, 8 months after a few iterations and lots of presentations and lots of ideas, we're sitting scratching our heads as to what to do. And in the room, obviously because everybody is a little stressed, our creative head was sitting over there, and he was, you shake your leg like a restless leg syndrome when you're sitting and you're just trying to vent some nervous energy. So basically, we looked at that and I said, listen, why is he restless? Why is he shaking his leg? Maybe all the guys who are real bikers feel that way every time they're not on a bike and they're not outside. If they're at their office, they have a nervous tick, a restless energy. They don't sleep well at night. They can't focus at work, right? And the reason for that maybe is that they're most comfortable, or they're most at home when they're outside. So when they're not outside, they have a nervous tick and they feel restless. And the entire idea was that we said, listen, maybe all riders have something called a wonder bug. This is all pre-COVID, so all sanity checks in place. This is no COVID in place, so we didn't have any issues then. But the point is that a nervous tick, a restless leg sitting in an office, I think everybody has seen it all the time, in wherever you are, can also become the single most piece of inspiration that leads to an insight, which says riders are most comfortable or most at home outside, is the insight that comes out of a restless leg syndrome sitting in office, which leads to a campaign, which leads to the launch campaign for that bike. I can't really tell you anything else about it, but it really did well. And that was the idea that actually went through. So cup of noodles and a restless colleague are both sources of inspiration.
That is genius and super exciting. And honestly, I just couldn't help but notice patterns in what you were saying, right? And this is one of the reasons I love asking this question, because a lot of people think that creative thinking, inspiration, these are black boxes, right? And no one truly knows how they work. And to some degree, that's absolutely true. We know very little about the human mind and how we do the things we do and why we do them, right? We're constantly like seeking meaning and answers. But at the same time, it is a lot more scientific and almost mechanical than people realize, right? So for instance, I feel like the word that came to mind when you shared the first story was synthesis, right? You were basically like looking at mutual associations, actively seeking mutual associations between the snack and the medium. And they are both, let's say, small, short, snacky, fast. And you just sort of brought those worlds together. The two worlds themselves are super unexpected. On face value, they have nothing to do with each other. And yet they share mutual associations. And it's incredible to, when you do this exercise of like just trying to spot patterns between seemingly unrelated universes, it's amazing how like much in common and connected things are, right? So that was the first word that came to mind. And the second was honestly empathy, right? The fact that you were looking beyond the act of, let's say, a nervous habit or tick, and actually getting into the mind and life of a rider who also happens to be a human being, right? I feel like we brands and everyone, we forget this. Your customer is actually like, once he or she has gotten off your bike, they're going home, right, to a job that maybe they don't like. Maybe they have a presentation the next day and they're scared and they're nervous and they're terrified. So I feel like that's basically empathy, right? Looking beyond the act, looking beyond what you see, and an attempt to understand. And that can apply to almost anything, right? So yeah, go ahead.
Just one piece, taking off from empathy and tying it back to what we've discussed a little earlier. I think empathy as a skill, empathy is clearly a skill, as in you can be empathetic very casually towards certain things that you already understand.
Yeah.
To be empathetic towards things that have nothing to do with you and you don't understand is a skill. And I think empathy as a skill is something that everybody should develop. I'm working really hard to build it.
Yeah.
But it's going to take me a lifetime. But the point is that the better you are at it, the first part of the conversation that we spoke about perspective, right? You cannot see multiple perspectives unless you can empathize with every single one of those viewpoints.
Right.
It's not so, yeah, it's a witty way of saying tilt your head. But the point is, once you tilt your head and it's you into somebody else's mind, you should be able to be in that mind and see it from that point of view. And it actually comes down to the ability to be empathetic, for you to be able to see the various perspectives. Or the other way to find out is to expose yourselves to as many perspectives that have already been shared about the subject or the topic that you're looking for, right? If you can't imagine what that perspective is, look it up. Most people have shared their point of view on everything under the sun, thanks to the internet, right? So you will have perspectives from all sorts, even on a coffee mug or a piece of, or a coffee bean, right? And the idea is to be empathetic so that you can see perspectives, in which case you will, yes, at the end of the day, come back to a lot of inspiration. Yeah. So I just wanted to add that I think empathy is a super duper important thing.
100%. And honestly, I feel this is actually a lovely segue into the next question, because you mentioned the internet, right? And as you said, it's not always easy to think of an original perspectives around a bike or a cup, or especially with, you know, with objects and mediums and concepts that we just don't live organically, that we're just not comfortable with. And so clearly the internet is a massive source of documented perspective, right? So following that theme, has your process of getting inspiration changed in this post-pandemic, strange, scary world that we are all in at all? Because you're in, for people who don't know, you're in Mumbai right now. It's like, so am I. It's pretty aggressively locked down. Haven't left my flat in God knows how long. So I find that I'm spending so much more time online than I was before. So I'm just curious. It's not a specific question about how you use the internet to get inspiration, but more around your process and if there's been any tangible shift or change.
Definitely has changed. I'm different in my own way to say that I was always working alone. I like working alone. I like thinking alone and then collaborating on the ideas, right? So I never got into a room blank and said, let's come up with ideas together.
Right.
I was always the kind of person who would say, let me think through it myself, write down 5, 6, 10 pieces of rubbish, and then let me collaborate and jam with other people, right?
Yeah.
So that first part of the process remains the same, right? So as far as seeking inspiration is concerned, other than the cigarette and coffee chats and random banter, which would lead to pieces of inspiration, other than that piece, most of it remains the same for me. But I think discounting the fact, if I were to discount that to be an insignificant part of the inspiration process, would be foolish. Because a lot of my life, I have spent random banters over lots of coffee and lots of cigarettes to say, come up with ideas and inspiration and, you know, anecdotal examples, share life stories with your colleagues, right? I was on a bike and I fell off, and this is what I felt, is a story that I will not find anywhere online. Nor will I be able to relate to it or feel that cringe in his face when he says that, you know, my knee scraped. So yeah, a big part of post-COVID lockdown, etc., I think a big part of the inspiration process is missing. But working alone and going through 100,000 things. I used to do it before and I continue to do it now. So for me, actually, it's not, that part hasn't changed at all. The human anecdotal stories, personal interactions, and personal insights is what I really miss. How much ever you may Zoom and Teams and whatever, um, you don't necessarily feel the same way till you share the physical space with that other person. You feel that tension in his voice, right?
Yeah.
So that I miss. I think that's changed dramatically, and I hope that whenever this is over, that part of the world of inspiration comes back to me, because I do miss that. I think that's really, really critical.
Yeah, I really resonate with your thought there actually, because it is missing and it's important. But also at the same time, I find interesting linking back to your sort of, let's say, initial framework or thesis that ultimately it's about perspective, right? And again, just to let's keep. I like this metaphor of just tilting the head and entering the multiverse. That's awesome. That is not, that has nothing to do with the reality that you're in, right? You can do that offline, you can do that online. Ultimately, you just need your head. So if it's still, attached to your shoulders, then process is largely unchanged, right? Of course, there are important layers. It's almost like a curriculum, right? There's missing modules, right? And you do miss those, and they are important, and we're not dismissing them. But I find this quite a refreshing perspective, actually, because I feel like most of the time there's always this just conversation, and it's almost like epic battle between offline and online, right? People are like, man, the people online are just distracted and not present, right? And how can you get inspired in front of your laptop, and you need to go on bike rides, and you need to go to the park, and we can't go to the park, and we can't go on bike rides right now. And it's just unhealthy to keep like moaning about that, right? It achieves nothing. So I find that the perspective, it's refreshing and also just pragmatic. It's like, look, ultimately the tools will always change. We could be sitting on Mars tomorrow, but the process is largely unchanged, right? It's almost transcends medium, transcends context. So that's awesome. I like that a lot.
Nobody has figured out the formula for inspiration, because it's like okay, again, a little bit of the physics geek in me is going to come out a little bit, so bear with me on this. But it's like a law of nature that inspiration has patterns. We just don't know what the formula is yet. Right? You will find common anecdotes of where inspiration came, how it came to people, what were they doing when it came, what were they working on at the time, what were their stresses in life, what were their challenges, and so on and so forth, right? If you just peel back, you will find repeating patterns on inspiration. We just don't know what exactly that thing is yet in terms of a formula. And that's the case with every single law of nature.
Yep.
Gravity had patterns till somebody put the formula down.
Yep.
Right? But you could see the same pattern. Things would fall. Pattern repeated itself. Inspiration is, to my mind, actually almost like a natural law that exists. We just haven't cracked what that law actually is. And I'm sure somebody somewhere, hopefully somebody listening to this podcast, is smart enough to come out and say, dude, here's the formula. This node into X squared. I don't know what that is, but somebody cracks it. And hopefully then it's just available to everybody. Till then, conversations like this hopefully gives people enough perspective to say that there is never a moment that you lack inspiration.
That is fascinating. I'm a little like blown away by that, actually. I'd like to think about that a lot more, because I'm not sure I fully agree with the need to almost codify it. So my brother he's obsessed about number theory and pure math, and doing his PhD, and Ramanujam is his childhood hero. And we have this chat a lot. I think as a very naive kid. He was like thinking, is there a, you know, a formula for love, right? Like, how do you derive that? And I think now there's a feeling that, you know, does it need to be derived, right? Applied, yes, 100%. But is, you know, application can actually be done regardless of whether or not it's been derived. I think it'll be fascinating. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like with something like inspiration, there's so many patterns, right? It's almost, as you said, it's almost as fundamental as an dropping an apple from, you know, an apple falling from a tree. You look at any novel, any script, any big idea, like there are patterns. I mean, even in your example, we figured out, okay, there's two patterns here: mutual association, synthesis, and what was it, empathy. So, but no, that's a fascinating perspective. I love to think about that more with you. I'm not a physicist, so I don't really have anything smart to contribute on the topic, but that's really interesting.
Listen, neither am I. I just love the idea of natural laws.
Yeah.
I just love the fact that they exist, and
Oh,
they
likewise.
govern everything.
Yeah.
And most importantly, the fact that they exist and they repeat and they're laws means that irrespective of what kind of state, place geographically you're in, here or Mars, inspiration exists just the way gravity exists,
Right.
right? Just because somebody figured out the formula for gravity and relativity doesn't mean that it's lost its, or you can just use it as a
Yep.
tool to come up with and whatever it is. Just because inspiration might become a natural law doesn't mean that it becomes a key to just unlock. All it does to people is assures you that it's there.
Yep.
Doesn't matter. You just have to find it. It's there. It will show up because it has to show up. And that's what I love about that concept. In my head, I don't think it takes away from inspiration if it becomes a codified law. You know what I mean?
No, I'm gonna rewind and change my perspective on this now because I think that's beautiful. It almost shuts up the naysayers, right? All the people who are like skeptical about it and frown and raise their eyebrows, like, you know, man, here he comes, the guy, you know, believes in inspiration, talks about inspiration, this fluffy pie in the sky concept. Those people wouldn't talk like that about gravity, right? It'd be socially unacceptable, really, to question gravity. I think at this point, I'm sure there's a group somewhere or Reddit forum that is questioning it. But anyways, so no, I agree. I agree. Absolutely. I do believe that the pursuit of science and understanding. But I also feel, and I know from all of our offline conversations, you're with me on this, that we don't need to wait for that moment and that breakthrough to start like thinking. And the work we're doing on Inspo, so much of it is just like looking at those patterns. We're not trying to necessarily come up with a formula. That would be awesome if we can, who knows? But at the moment, it's just understanding those patterns and leveraging them, right? And understanding how they can be, you know, applied to machines. Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. But since we touched upon Inspo now, let's try something fun and honestly a little mad. I'm curious to see how this goes. So just before the call, I searched on Inspo, one of your favorite topics, coffee, right? And I found a bunch of very cool stuff. Yeah, exactly. Cue sip. And I saved 3 pieces of AI inspiration that really resonated, right?
Cool.
Now, one by one, I'm going to share them with you. And it would be epic if you can just share any top of mind response, idea, thought based on them, right? It can be totally crazy, nonsensical. Let's just jam and see how it goes.
Awesome. Do stupid things faster with more energy. I'm there.
Perfect. Right. So the first is just an interesting word association with coffee that Inspo picked up from analyzing 100,000 collaborative poems written by millennials on Haiku Jam, right? And the word association is this. Coffee is associated with the adjective little, right? So what comes to mind when you think of coffee plus little?
It's coffee plus little. If I had to do something with it, the first thought actually that came to my mind was, have you seen the Jetsons?
Yes.
Yeah, they had those small little capsules which would become cars and ships and whatnot, right? Coffee and little, if I could, I would create a small little capsule, a little capsule
Yeah.
I could put in my pocket that if I just slapped onto the table or into my mug would become a hot steaming cup of Arabica. That would be the first thing that came to my mind.
Someone should do that. That is badass.
Take
Right?
my money, rob me completely blind as long as you give me the capsule.
Exactly. I actually read some of the poems that analysis was conducted, and it was interesting just seeing the use of that word little, because initially I thought perhaps it's been used in the context of the coffee, right? A little coffee. But it wasn't. It was used in the context of like an emotion and some like associated, state. So like coffee is a little bit of happiness, right? Coffee is a little bit of sweetness. And I thought little is such a beautiful word, actually, right? It's so disarming, it's really soft. And somehow, like, it seems more impactful than big or large, like a lot of happiness, right? An infinite amount of happiness. A little, like, does more for you. It stirs the heartstrings a little bit more, which I thought interesting.
It's
Little.
sweet, right? Little is sweet.
Little is sweet.
Yeah, as in it's a little bit of happiness. That's lovely. If I had that context, that would not be a coffee capsule, a little capsule would not be the thought that would have come to my mind.
Exactly, which is why I was conscious not to give you that context, because that's exactly what happened to me as well. So, all right, this is fun. Next one. So this is a question that's been written by GPT-3 and associations from Haiku Jam that Inspo has just synthesized and brought together. So the question is, what type of coffee do you drink when you are in love?
Irish.
Irish.
As in, first top of mind reaction. I don't know why I said Irish. I have no intention to ever drink Irish coffee. I think it's sick. But however, that's the first thought that came to mind if I were to, what coffee would I drink if I was in love? Would be Irish. Don't ask me why. I don't know.
I got to ask you why, because if I were to be your, I wasn't going to, I was going to move on, but I'm like, this is a rabbit hole now. So if I was your pseudo therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, I'd want to understand like, what is it about the word Irish as a word or as a culture, as a people that you associate with love? Because that to me is fascinating, because when you said it, it made sense to me on a level I don't even know, because I would never drink Irish coffee, right? And yet it felt right. So what do you think?
The only association I can think about of why my brain would make that instantaneous connection, and I have no idea why, but the only connection I can think about is intoxication.
Right.
Between the emotion of love or being in love and being drunk. I don't know what else it could be, but that's the only connection between alcohol and love that I can think of.
Oh, that's amazing. That's a powerful association. All right. Last one. So this is another GPT-3 powered thought. Coffee is a way of stealing time that should by rights belong to your employer.
Oh man, I agree 100%. And I have so many complex thoughts running in my mind right now that I don't know which one to pick on and articulate. But I'm going to come up with another product idea.
Okay.
I think this is a product idea, which is basically, and employees might find me and kill me on the road if anybody actually does this. But for every coffee break that somebody takes, take the amount of time and take it off their vacation leaves. And you compensate for the time that they've not used in office to the time that they would have otherwise been holidaying. So if coffee is an escape and a holiday is an escape, and eventually you only get a limited time of escape, I think that should be the currency. So that could be a HR policy that basically the entire employee world kills me for. But that's the thought that came to mind.
That's super interesting. A little horrible.
Pathetic.
Yeah, that would definitely be unpopular, but fascinating. I had an idea when you were chatting, which I think would be more popular and welcomed. You know what? Have you done what do you call it? Oh man, I can't believe I'm blanking on the word Pomodoro timer.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that focusing exercise where like you work uninterrupted for 25 minutes. It's like a technique. I do it from time to time, actually, especially on days where I'm feeling like just naturally distracted and I can't focus my mind. I like, okay, turn it on, remove all distractions, and then do like a 2-3 hour work sprint in 25-minute intervals. It's like 25 minutes, 5-minute break, 25 minutes, 5-minute break, 25 minutes, 5-minute break. So I thought, imagine a Tabata timer, which was also an espresso machine, right? And
see, that's a better idea.
turn on espresso, 25-minute, it could come during the break or, and yeah, I mean, I don't know how exactly that, it's all in the realm of time and coffee. So anyways, that'd be fun.
That would be awesome. See, the thing is, anybody who makes a product, other than the idea that I came up with, where basically the entire world is going to get out of their houses with a pitchfork and feed me down.
It's just
right?
a little scary. It's like, oh gosh, I don't want the stress. Getting a coffee and thinking, I could have been on a beach in Goa during this time.
I am most shocked at my association and idea because I did not know I had a fascist dictator in me, right? I just did not think so. But I'll have to contemplate a little more on this. Maybe I've run out of coffee. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, maybe that's it. All right, that was fun. We're definitely doing that again in future episodes. That was amazing. And yeah, I loved your responses as well. So thank you. So I wanted to end on a different note, right? I found that in life that oftentimes when someone inspires us, right, we never actually let them know, right? And this is such a shame because the acknowledgement would firstly put a smile on their face at the very least. And secondly, it could just encourage them to keep doing what they're doing and being who they are, right? I know that sometimes when I'm having a really bad day or I'm in a bit of a bad rut with confidence issues and a friend or a customer, someone just emails, me and the team saying, thank you, like, I'm grateful for this and you inspired this. Makes a world of a difference. It just literally changes the tempo of the day. So I thought as a final question / request, if anyone has inspired you recently, maybe you can, say thanks and give them a shout out and just share some reasons why.
That's lovely, by the way. That's really awesome. As in, let me think about this. There are so many people that it just feels difficult to pick one or two or whatever. But I'm gonna do it. Of course I'll do it. But if you allow me, I'm gonna do somebody I know personally and somebody I don't know personally.
Right.
As a shout out to both.
Sure.
Yeah. The first one is the one I don't know.
Okay.
He celebrated his 95th birthday a couple of days ago. The gentleman's name is Sir David Attenborough.
Of course.
I think he is an absolute inspiration. At 95 and for practically all his life with a single-minded focus of wanting to do one thing.
Man, amazing.
And do it well. And unwavering, absolutely unwavering commitment, right? As in, if I could have that strength, he's inspired me to try and get there. I'm nowhere there, but he's inspired me to try and get there. So that would be my huge shout out to him for inspiring me to want to do better. On the other hand, the one I know personally would be actually my dad.
Lovely.
Yeah. His name is Dr. Bibhash Banerjee. It sounds very similar to my name. That's because that's how he chose my name.
Right.
But and for one particular trait of his, right? He didn't do a master's right after college. He got to work right after college. He worked really hard and blah, blah, blah. And then he was in the corporate world for all his life. And then he retired from the corporate world when he was 50.
Wow.
And at 55, he decided he wants to do a master's degree.
Oh, wow.
At 57, after finishing his master's degree, he said, you know what, I'm going to do my doctorate. So he started his PhD at the age of 58. And he completed his PhD just after he turned 60.
What a hero.
And till today, I have not seen the kind of childlike enthusiasm and curiosity to learn new things that he doesn't necessarily understand, but wants to get his hands on and try and play, including Inspo, by the way. Right? That serious level of drive and curiosity to constantly keep learning and improving, I think is phenomenally inspiring. And if I can be that at the age of 60, 50, 40, if I still have that drive and curiosity to learn more and always find the other perspective, I'll be blessed. So hats off to him, complete inspiration on lots of counts, but this one for sure. So that's my shout out.
That was amazing, man. And yeah, honestly, I feel really inspired. And one person I am really excited to show this episode to, and I hope she hears it, is my mom. Because I have this chat with her all the time. I feel she's getting to that point in life. She had a horrible illness recently. She recovered. She really well, amazing strength of mind. And yet at the same time, I feel she's consciously like getting older, right? And she mentally is like, tells herself that I'm getting older. And she's still really curious and she does so many things, but I'm trying to convince her that, you know, age it's a massive cliche, but it's not a number. It really is just a state of mind, and youth is a state of mind. It's not like a biological, you know, truth. So thank you. Those were great. So
if I could ask you the same question.
Yeah. Whew. This is going to sound like a bit of a cop-out, but honestly, I'm going to say you. And that's not just because it's the easy way out. And we just spoke about inspiration for I don't know how long. We probably well overshot time, but it was a lot of fun and I have no regrets. But yeah, I would say you, because for those who are going to listen to this, obviously they'll feel that perhaps we're having this conversation for the first time, but reality is we're not, right? We've been working together for a year now. We've been speaking for longer than that. And I know that I've just learned so much from your perspective, from your insight. And not just from the, you know, not just because you're intelligent and you're critical, but because you're actually very, very inspiring. I found that when I'm super stuck or the team is stuck, you've always come in and helped us through those problems, not because, again, you offered the right solution every time, and although you have in many ways, just because you helped us, take a step back and literally tilt our heads and look at it from a completely different perspective. And one of the things I found about inspirational people like you, but also inspiration as a concept, that it seems to, like, whether it creates energy or transfers energy or unlocks energy, there's some boost, right? It's like, which is why I feel like the lightning bolt, lightning strike is absolutely apt, because there's a charge, right? I was having this chat with a friend the other day about, how do you know when you're inspired? And it's like, the drab answer is you just know. But actually, from almost like a biological, biochemical, perspective, you do feel this, like there is some cellular shift, right? And before, like, I didn't want to get going or get started, I now do. And nothing fundamentally has changed other than something in my head, which I still, I may not even have the idea. So I found that every time I chat with you, I feel that jolt and that spark, like, every single time. And I'm really grateful for that. So it's definitely you.
Oh, shucks. I don't know how to take compliments, but this was, thank you. I've already used my inspiring person, so I'm going to say whatever else I had to say offline.
Yep, great. So, all right. So this was the first ever episode of Think Inspired. I have no idea how we're going to end it. I think we should just say bye, because we've spoken a lot and this was a lot of fun. And yeah, thanks so much, man. We should do this again. I think there's going to be more people on in the coming weeks, but I feel let's give it a month or so. Let's go out, enter the multiverse, get a bunch of new perspectives, and then record all over again.
No, I love this. I think this was fabulous. This is one of the most inspiring conversations that I've had in a long time, and that just helps. I think people will find this a lot of fun. This was really good fun, man. I think
this is great. I honestly, I'm amazed that it's gone this smoothly. Well, maybe it hasn't. Maybe we'll listen to it and we'll be like,
when we listen to it, we'll squirm, very likely.
What were we talking? Those were not good ideas. But no, it felt great. So thanks a lot.
It was awesome.
Thanks, man. We'll do it again. Think Inspired.
Think Inspired.
Absolutely.